Rand's a special guy. I actually, you may not know this, but you actually spent 15 minutes with me. I called you up and you gave me 15 minutes of your time like 6 or 7 years ago. Oh. So, and he's just the nicest guy, and I don't have a whole lot of people that I respect or follow in technology, and he's one of the few that I've grown with over time. And it's not because there's not a lot of great people, but I can identify a lot with the way he approaches business. And there's very few people that are as transparent and open with the way he shares information. And so it's really a privilege and honor to be able to interview him today. If you haven't, he has a Whiteboard Friday that I know I've already talked to. People are like loving. He writes candid blog posts, and I know you're working on a book. You are a college dropout.
Yes.
Yes, but that's always interesting because I know lots of people here can identify with that, which is great. UW was the college you went to, which is awesome. You are the Wizard of Moz, which I love creative titles like that. So he's been doing that since 2011 or 13?
2004?
2004. So the company founded in like 99-ish, right? With consulting, and it kind of merged, or it's like
yeah,
a
like
sort of
2001.
2001, and so the company has evolved through software, and he led the charge there as a CEO for a good chunk of that high growth period, and now you are an independent contributor doing all things Moz and doing things like this, being able to speak to us about the things you know about the web. So would love to give you a big hand for joining us here today. So. All right, so we are going to have to talk loud. Our mic system that we tested like 3 times died 5 minutes before the talk. So fortunately, we still get to record it and create the podcast, which is great, but I'm going to have to shout louder as I can. And I know he's coming off of a cold, so we'll be...
So you should fist bump me and not shake my hand. That's...
So for this soapbox, I'd love to go through. You've created a list of things that you wish you probably could have done while... if you knew the younger Rand starting to start the business that you did. And you have a number of them. I know you've given this talk. What I'd like to do is sort of get behind the scenes on specific examples of the things that drove you to think about your world that way as to why. And the first one was learn to code. And I know we have a lot of technical people here in the audience and a lot of marketers. Why do you think coding would have been such a great thing to know early on in your career?
Yeah, so I want to be clear about that. My regret is not learning software engineering. Technically, I did learn to code. You know, I don't know if I have the skills anymore, but I can. You know, I used to write some code in PHP and that kind of stuff early in my career. But I don't think learn to code is the bar. It's really about software engineering as a holistic practice, right? And that. The reason I have so much regret around that is because I've had so many years of interacting with engineers, right, as a CEO and now as an individual contributor, where it was very hard for me to know whether what I was hearing was, from them was accurate in terms of estimating things, in terms of the expectations of work that I should have, in terms of empathy for the work that they do, right? I think it's very challenging for me still, despite having worked with engineers, senior, junior, all different kinds for a decade. It's still very difficult for me to have empathy and to understand why something goes right, why it goes wrong, when it goes wrong, whether that is something that was irresponsible on their part, or whether this was an incredibly challenging thing. So, Brian, I think, as you know, one of the things that Moz does, like early on, right? One of the things I hated about Google was that, Michael, was it like 2005, 2006, something like that, when they took away the link command? Oh, God, yes. Right? So it used to be the case, you could go to Google, right? You could type link:/ZURB.com, and Google would show you all the links that they knew about that pointed to ZURB, which was super useful, right? Because then you could do that for anyone on the web, so you could see like, oh, well, what links has Google indexed on this to this website or to this web page? all those kinds
I
of
know
things.
that you like, Michael is one of our first
yes.
clients actually, ClickTracks way back when, so it's cool that you have to.
Yeah. Michael and I have been friends for years, and Michael's deep in the SEO world, so I know he has this history. So we, it was actually a crazy forum thread where like Todd Malicote and Christoph Semper and I were like, well, what if we could build our own index of Google, which of course in 2006 sounded
was a crazy idea.
Insane, sounded totally insane. I pitched lots of people on this idea. In 2007, when Moz launched a little bit of software and our revenue started growing, we got some VC interest. And when the VCs came, I said to Michelle Goldberg at Ignition Partners, who invested $1 million in us, like, hey, I want to build this thing. I want to build this index of the web. And I found a high school friend of my wife's who was the only person who said, yes, I can do that for not very much money. Everybody else was like, no, you're crazy, that's stupid. You need 10 times that money, if not 100 times that amount of money. And then he did it, right? Like he and one other guy like basically built this thing, launched Linkscape, and it worked, right? So, which of course creates this false bias in me. I'm like, oh, well, all right. If an engineer says they can do something, they can do it, right? If they say like, oh, I'll build you an index of the web, it'll take me about 9 months. Great, you can trust them. No, you can trust Ben. Like that guy, that guy you can trust.
So maybe speak to the marketers in the room who hear you say code in the discipline of engineering and understanding what that is. That seems fairly far-fetched. Like, are you going to go veer off into this place of understanding code? I know maybe it's just specific to your background, but to an aspiring person that wants to understand how am I going to be an effective marketer? Do you think that learning to code is an important aspect of understanding online marketing?
Yes and no. I think the basics, right? Learning to code, like going through Code Academy and something like that, that will actually make you a better marketer in a lot of respects, right? Knowing some basic JavaScript and some basic, HTML and CSS and those kinds of things. Yes, that is helpful. But
don't mind me. I'm going to get my speaker here as it fell down my shirt. So keep going.
One of your, I was like, oh, he's got a real itchy chest hair. That happens. It's totally forgivable.
Don't mind me, folks. Keep going.
So what I would recommend is not that every marketer should learn software engineering, but that if you are starting a company and the basis of that company, right, that the thing that it is built upon is software engineering, or the thing that it's built upon is furniture design, or the thing that it's built upon is, let's say, clothing textures, right? Like, then you should have deep experience in that field. I think it is naive and irresponsible for entrepreneurs like me to go dive in and be like, well, I'll build a great software company. That'll, I can totally do that despite not knowing the fundamental thing that my company is built upon.
So let's take that idea just a step further. Does that mean even someone that has more authority in a business, like as a manager, should know these things? Or is that, because we've talked, and I know you've talked a lot about parallel paths of sort of individual contributors in management. Do you think that still applies to someone that is managing people?
Yes and no. I have seen managers who've been very successful with individual contributors whose job they absolutely could not do. I think that they have a fundamental understanding of it, and they know the inputs and outputs. But a lot of management, especially later stage in a company, is less about the, hey, let me rate the quality of what you built and let me review every piece of your work, and more, did you have a successful outcome? And did you build the thing the right way? And did you build, or did you do this work that was needed in the time that we needed it in? And did you work on the right stuff? And were you good to work with your peers, right? Like, did they enjoy working with you?
Right.
Conflict resolution. So a lot of management is not doing the work, which is why I kind of dislike it. So I like doing the work.
So number 2 here, you got spend time at other startups. So this, in retrospect, you've been the same business pretty much doing
whole life,
your whole life.
Yeah.
So you have zero comprehension, and I'm in a similar capacity. I've worked at one other business. Do you feel that it's more about, because you did some consulting earlier on in the life of, did you get enough of those experiences? Because this sounds like it's very much about wanting to be in a startup and going through that experience of learning, sort of trials and tribulations of that versus sort of
Yeah.
being embedded in understanding parts of how a business operates.
Right. I don't think, my regret around this is not that I didn't understand what, our clients need, or, clients when we were a consulting company and now customers that were a software company, that sort of thing. It was more that any new experience that we had at Moz, I didn't know whether that was a normal thing or whether that was very unusual. And I didn't know whether what I could expect could be the next phase, right? So I had no idea, for example, when we scaled from around 60 people to 110 people, that adding people quickly, not the raw number of people you had, but the speed at which you add people to the company is a dilutionary factor in your culture and your values, right? Because you just can't, those people can't quickly get into, oh, this is what it's like to be a Mozer, and this is what it's like to be at Moz, and thus, you find yourself with much higher turnover with folks like that, and you find old timers sort of getting frustrated and leaving the company, and things changing very quickly. And I had no experience with any of this stuff, right? So
how do you think that affected, say, even your core competency and maybe even marketers understanding, like, having those diverse experiences? Because design is in a similar capacity like this, where a lot of designers kind of learn to design by themselves and are self-taught, and really this is very social parts of what we do. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of trying to influence. Do you think having those company experiences are important for people starting their careers or even starting businesses in that capacity from a marketer's perspective?
Yeah. I mean, this is why I think it is. I'm not a big fan of the criticism of people early in their career jumping around a lot. Like, I think that's actually a really good thing to do. I think if you spend a year or two here, a year or two there, and you do that 4 or 5 times, that can be a great thing, right? If 5 years into your career you've been at 4 companies, I don't think you should look at yourself and say, oh man, I don't have any loyalty, no one's going to hire me. I think you should say, hey, guess what? The next company I go to, when I finally find that great place where I can fit, I will be able to say, hey, this is a familiar experience. I've been through this before. I've seen this. I know how this goes, right? And I think that's really powerful. It's powerful for marketers, certainly, because as a marketer, a lot of what you're working on is different campaigns and tactics and channels. And if you've seen this channel perform a bunch of times in this fashion and seen who it works for and doesn't, and seen when it, you learn a tremendous amount, right? And that diversity of experience is a powerful thing.
Right.
That's why so many of the best marketers who are in-house come from the consulting side, because consultants, like, you get to see a bunch of experience, and then, right? I imagine that's probably.
I've worked with over 500 companies, so I got a pretty good sense of how a lot of companies operate.
I would not be surprised if there are a lot of people who are trying to recruit product designers from ZURB, right?
All the time. They tell me all the time. I get a call a day. I'm so
so Brian, I would like to know who I can have.
Yes. Such as a consultant. So one of the things I think is interesting, because you run a SaaS-based business, it's software, and the sort of understanding of how you bring customers into your product, right? As marketers, we tend to think of it as this broad-based approach to get to lots of people, right? And you have all these channels, right?
And then the conversion is the end.
And the conversion is in, and you've said, okay, well, if you had a choice to do it differently, you would have someone holding those people through the sort of that funnel component where you're trying to decide if the software is good and onboarding them, which I think is sort of more of a metaphor for almost thinking about your whole marketing philosophy, which is build the relationship, or is that a different concept? Is that slightly different?
No, I think the problem is that I've always had that philosophy of, marketing should be about helping someone who is seeking something out. This is why I love SEO, right? Because you're not trying to get someone who is, watching a football game to buy, your foot powder, right? Like, interrupting the thing that you want to do to try and sell you this other thing that you probably don't want. But you know what? Guess what? Even though you don't actually want it, you're now more biased to buy it, and I can prove it. I think that kind of sucks. Like, I hate most marketing. especially advertising. I really dislike most advertising. But I love SEO. I love search in general because it's like, I want this thing right now. Okay, here's this thing right now. And if I do a great job of providing it to you, and then lots of other people think I've done a great job of it, they'll link to me and they'll all share it and it'll rank highly. Awesome, right? That's like it's a win-win. But I think for some reason, I don't know why, I was just so biased against the cost structure component of customer success and onboarding, right? Because it costs, then every customer who signs up like costs you, a couple of hours of a person's time to like schedule and train them and help them out. And for me, it was always this admission of defeat. Like, oh, well, the product wasn't intuitive, so you had to have a person there to hold their hand.
Right.
But now I think that was just naivete and youthful hubris.
So what would be the top couple of things you would need to consider on an onboarding with having a person there that's
Well, I think it's the same philosophy, right, that we talked about with kind of search. It's that idea that here is someone who cares about you and cares about your success, and they want you to be able to understand and use this product in the best possible way so that it's really useful and good for you.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to be great at, but when you are, it's super powerful. So I think I was sharing yesterday that we started using a customer success team at Moz this past year, and it's something like I think the retention rate for the month, it's like month 1, 2, 3, because we've only had it like a few months now, but for someone who has had a customer success person onboard them versus someone who has not is like 70% higher.
Mm.
So.
Right. So this is a challenge though, because a lot of businesses face this and they sort of throw this person just in the mix, right? If everyone's gone to the big box stores and you go in and you're like, I find this and you can't find anything. It's like, it's almost frustrating, right? You're like, I can't find anything, I'll just do it myself. And if you do the same thing with a complex piece of software, it's almost more damaging, I think, because it can be really frustrating, and finding talented people and the business appreciating that role can be very difficult. And
I saw yesterday, I think it was like last night, I was browsing the web, maybe it wasn't Hacker News, it might have been inbound.org or something like that, but there was a photo of this store, I think it was in the UK, and they had 2 baskets that you could pick up when you walk into the store. And one said, sure, I'd love some help, and one said, no, I'm good, don't bug me. I was like, oh my God, I always wanted that. Right? Like, finally. And I think customer success and onboarding is kind of the same way, right? So
right.
We've actually talked at Moz about testing in the future when you first sign up for an account, you have that option of like, yes, schedule me for something, or like, no, I'll do it myself.
Right.
And potentially, we've even talked about like different pricing models that apply to the. If you're like, hey, I'm an expert, I'll do it myself. It's like, great, you can pay a lower price, but you sign up for a year. Right? You sign up for an annual contract. And then it's like, hey, I don't really know if this is right for me. Great, talk to a customer success person. There's a free trial, and it's month to month.
Right. I always wish it was sort of the bulb that sort of changed colors, because first when I go on, I'm like, no, don't talk to me, I don't want to talk. But then I'm like, I don't know what to do. Right? And then you got to go back to the same person and say, yeah, I need your help. And it's like, oh, man. But some of it is you want to know if the person can actually help you before you know that they're going to try.
Oh my God! And for like schlubby tech guy, you walk into Home Depot, it's already an emasculating experience, right? It's gonna be.
Another point you make is launch EVPs, not MVPs, right? And I guess the E stands for exceptional product. So the big lean wave and trying to get product out and figuring out how to work with customers, it seems like you're already kind of doing that in a marketing capacity anyway. You're already sharing knowledge, you're already getting people, and there's your approach of marketing first, then product already kind of falls in a line with a minimum product, because you're testing the ideas before many of them have even arrived at your product in a way.
Yeah.
I'm just curious a little bit about your experience there. I know you've had some ups and downs with some of your product releases. And maybe speak a little bit of that from even like some of your products, like the one where you're searching the web and your link builder. I mean, that's like a huge flop if it doesn't work, right? And it's so hard to maintain a product like that.
Well,
There's really no minimum
that one's a good
product.
example, actually, right? So like we built that many years ago. I'll try and make a long story short. So we built that many years ago, that high school friend of Geraldine's, of my wife's, who built it, right? And then he left the company. He went to Google for a while, then he built his own startup. In the meantime, after he'd left, we put like we had a new team who was working on this link index, and we, probably starting in 2012 maybe, we started losing ground to some new players in the field. So for those of you who are marketers or SEOs, you've probably heard of two like big competitors to Moz's link index, the Open Site Explorer product, and those are Ahrefs and Majestic SEO. And both of them, in my opinion, with the exception of a couple features, are bigger and better than we are. Like, just bar none, right? And we have been playing catch up against these competitors because for years and years we were trying to make our indices better. We were trying to rebuild the technology underpinning it and having no success. And a lot of my frustrations around software engineering come from that process, like talking to engineers every week for months and years and getting nothing done, and like every attempt failed and those kinds of things. So Ben and another guy who had left Moz started this company after he left Google, and I had breakfast with him 6 months ago, and we chatted, and I was like, okay, what's the thing you're working on? And I was like, could you repurpose that and build this like link index that we want again? And he's like, Ben is uncomfortable silence is totally fine with him. He's comfortable with them. So he's staring up into space for like 5 minutes, and I can see like he's writing, the code, like in his head. He's like, yes, we can do that. So then I have this like, well, should Moz like try and buy your company? Yes. Yes, you should, right? Like total software engineer guy. And so we did. Like we basically made an offer, and they joined the company. So now he's working on it again, and we hope that next year we're gonna launch this thing. But that is a perfect example, right? If when that launches, it's not quite as good as Majestic and Ahrefs, but it's it's an MVP, like it's a first attempt, and we tell our customers, hey, this is an MVP. Like it works, it can scale up, it'll eventually get there. The perception has been, like we've done this in the past with other products, it will be, oh, Moz released another shitty product that's like not good enough. I should stick with their competitors, right? It is only the case that if we launch something that is a clear, obvious, massive step up from what everyone else has, that people would go, okay, all right, I'll switch. Right? Because the switching cost is high. You have to, you got to cancel your workflow and your processes and share the new password and log in around to everyone in your company and team who uses it.
Isn't that funny? Like that seems to drag everyone down.
It does. It totally does. You have to get it approved by billing and finance, right? Like the switching costs are high. It's frustrating. And so I think the MVP model is awesome when you are very first starting out as a company, when you show it to the first 5 or 10 people and there's no like brand association they're going to carry, right? They're not going to go amplify and be like, well, now the whole world thinks that this MVP defines who you are as a company. I think it's wonderful to use the lean startup philosophy. Right. But when you are an existing company and when you put something out and you know that everyone's going to pay attention to it, you cannot win, right? I mean, if Tesla came out with the car and they're like, well, this is our MVP. It's not nearly as good as any of the cars that you currently drive, but it does go places and it's electric. You'd be like, well, that was a big old failure, and I'm real pissed at Elon Musk and Obama for all the government money that they wasted, and like this is crap. And even if 2 or 3 years later that car was great, the reputation would be a hangover. There would be a constant brand hangover from that, and that's my fear with MVPs.
Right. Next one, push your investors tougher on you, right? So you've highlighted that your investors were a little more hands-off and understood that, you've got some amazing things and qualities and doing it, and let Rand do Rand's thing, and you're saying, no, don't let Rand do what Rand does. I need someone to be harder on the way I approach the business, right?
Yeah.
That's what I read from that, right?
And that's definitely the case. I mean, there's just, there were a lot of conversations, like, especially with Brad Feld after he joined the board of directors, where, I told him this, right? I told him, like, I just want to shake you and be like, just tell me what to do. I know you know. Like, I know you've seen this story before. You've watched this movie 100 times. Just tell me what to do here. And I think both he and Michelle had a little bit more of a like, and this is absolutely a fault of mine also, which is that when someone tells me that I can't do something, or that something that I believe is the wrong way to do something, that is the greatest motivation I ever get. It's not a healthy one. Like, that's not an emotionally healthy way to live your life necessarily. But I got to tell you, so I used to come down to Silicon Valley a lot because I pitched VCs a number of times, right? I've written about that on the blog, and most of those rounds failed, FYI. But when those folks, like especially in 2009, I pitched probably 40 different VCs at offices, mostly over on Sand Hill Road, right? But and got 40 no's at the end. And that is what made me go, all right, what I heard from them is, you got a few $1 million business, but it'll never be like 10 million, it'll never be 50 million. And so I was like, oh, you. Like, oh, now it is on, right? Like, that is the way to get me to do something. Same thing with the link index, right? It was sort of like, oh, I have this interesting idea. And then when a lot of people told me no, it was like, okay, we're doing it. That's it. I heard too many people say we can't do it. We have to.
Would you think that sort of quality you have makes you a better marketer? I mean, part of the SEO thing is people telling you, like, no, you can't do it that way, and you're like, no, I can.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's. I don't think it's a totally healthy way to be, actually, right? And as I've gotten older,
but your videos, they're always about dispelling, it's not like this. It's like
Google
this.
told you this, but actually.
All right, and you got this big grin on your face, like,
I know. It's who I am, right? Like, it works for me. No, I think that, the way this relates to like my investors is that I think they saw that quality and they said, hey, we can't push this guy because then he'll push back and he'll go the opposite direction and it will be an unhealthy relationship. And so we have to sort of softly coach. And I wish that I were a more self-aware person at that time. Right? That I could just be someone who had more humility, and I think this is hard for a lot of people. Like, I bet some of you are like me, right? Where your boss,
nobody's
someone on
like
your
you,
team. Maybe I'm all alone on this, but right, like somebody on your team tells you like, oh, you can't do this, and this isn't the way to do it, and instead of thinking, oh, they must be trying to help me, they must be trying to like save me from pain and strife and heartache, you think, well, them, right? Like, they're stopping me in my path and they don't know what they're talking about and I can do this regardless of, maybe some of that, like we can do a better job of internalizing and being comfortable with that pushback. I wish I could have been a little better at that.
So in some ways, it's seeking out mentors, even if you aren't raising capital, that have that same approach of wanting to push back on some of the
Yeah, I think it's really healthy to have disagreement. One of the people who always pushed back on me, and I thought it was just wonderful during my tenure as CEO, was my chief operating officer, Sarah Bird, who's now Moz's CEO. And she wouldn't take no for an answer, right? She was always really tough. We'd been great friends for years, a decade plus, and she didn't, she had none of this like, well, maybe I should softly push him, right? She'd just disagree. And we kind of had this agreement the whole time I was CEO. We had this agreement, like, if she thought something was wrong and I thought it was right, we would find a compromise. Like, we wouldn't just go and do it my way or the highway, that kind of thing. I think that worked out really well.
Right. One of the next ones you talk about is sort of thinking about how you might do it is And these kind of, I think, go together is hire less and perhaps invest in fewer people with the expectation that you're going to build less as well, right? This is a tough concept because I know when people see there's less people that perhaps they're being tasked with too much, right? Where I think in some of what you're saying is those smart people figure out how to do less as well with more impact.
Yeah. So for me, it's a hire less, build less, focus more, right? And I think this philosophy extends to sort of the world of marketing as well, right? Where for me, I have not been passionate, and Moz has tried over time, right, to get into broader forms of marketing, both with our software and with our content and stuff. And I think actually we always have our most success when we are most focused. When we say, hey, this SEO thing, this is still a problem. Billions of people are searching. Billions more people are searching today than they were 3 years ago. Billions more searches are happening today than were 3 years ago. And our job is to help people do that really well.
So the word focus, it's a tough one because focus means a lot to a lot of different people, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about marketing and you say, okay, we got focus, and there's certain aspects of it. I mean, there's tons and tons of channels and things you can do, and a lot of marketers, they are tasked with a lot of horizontal components of doing different things, right? And so when you say, well, focus on an aspect of the business or focus on one product, there's still a number of things that go fairly wide and horizontal in those approaches. Do you have advice for marketers and people that have to do this? Because right now they're being stretched, perhaps just like a designer stretched across and horizontally across a business, but to specialize in one part leaves lots of gaps across.
So I think this is something where this advice can apply sort of universally, whether you are a product designer working with engineers to build something, whether you're a marketer who's trying to get your message out. So I'll start with the product designer, right? Like what I would say is, rather than saying, okay, we need this product and it has to do all these things, let's instead say, this is the most important part of the product, and we can build the best one of these in the world. Start with that, right? And then go to the engineers and say, hey, I want you to build me the smallest workable version of this and then show it to me. And then we'll build the next chunk and the next chunk and the next chunk. That creates a really nice form of focus. Same thing applies in the marketing world, right? So you say, hey, here's all the marketing channels that we could potentially consider. And a lot of times marketers are tasked with, you, marketer, you work here, go invest in all these channels, make sure they're all running. That's a terrible way to do marketing. Like it really is. It doesn't show you your strengths. It doesn't concentrate your firepower. Like what you want to do is say, hey, we are amazing at Facebook advertising and at building our audience on Facebook. So you know what? We're kind of going to ignore Twitter and LinkedIn and search and content marketing and video and YouTube, and all these other things. We're going to ignore all of them until we do this extremely well. And once that's humming, I'll do the next one thing, right? Rather than, let me just spread out all my efforts, because then you're just in maintenance mode marketer. Right. And maintenance mode marketing, I've seen it at tons of companies, and it will never get you the step function increases, the growth that you're looking for, versus finding that thing that you're best, that you're really great at, not necessarily best in the world, but best in class, best in your industry, and then focusing.
So we're going to take a couple audience questions, but I do have some more specific questions around just your refocus on SEO. So 2017, what do we need to be worrying about from an SEO perspective? Where should people, ZURB is in this boat, we have to figure out where, if we're going to spend any amount of time, what should we be focusing on? Writing better content?
I think
connecting, socializing, where is SEO?
The thing that seems to be happening in Google, at least in the English language results, so mostly like US, UK, Canada, Australia, is that Google is getting better and better at a couple of things. One, they're getting better at identifying content that does a phenomenal job of solving the user's problem. Oh, thank you. Of solving the user's problem. You rock. even before that content has necessarily proven itself through sort of links and shares and broad distribution. That's pretty impressive. I think that is coming from their their new focus on machine learning and deep learning and AI. I think it's also coming from them using a lot more engagement data, right? So that if they see that, like, well, Brian searched for this thing and then he scrolled to page 2, he found this piece and that seemed to answer his query. Almost nobody else even made it to page 2, but like the fact that this seemed to work so well for him and none of the stuff on page 1 did, let's try and like rank that up higher for a little while and see if other people also get a lot of value out of it. I think they are using a ton of behavioral data now, at least in the US results. So as a marketer, as someone who cares about doing SEO, I think the lesson there is, how do I make something that does a much better job of solving the searcher's query? Not just the query, but the problem, right? The query is only one part of the actual problem that the human being who typed it in had. So if you look for men's dress shoes, right? I mean, you have lovely shoes, right? But you might you might be looking for new brands and styles and all that kind of stuff.
Bought them from Men's Warehouse, client of ours.
Really?
Nice shoes.
Men's Warehouse. It's kind of blowing my mind right now. All right. I mean, I have this, like, 1990s association where the guy's like, you're gonna like the way you look, and then you're like, I don't like the way any of them look.
Yes.
So, but there you go.
We did a lot of that while trying to help them. Those pictures, they don't look right.
Oh, yeah. When you search for men's dress shoes, right, implicit in that query is you're probably looking for, you don't know which brand you necessarily want. You're probably in an exploratory phase that will eventually lead to a purchase phase, but not necessarily directly, right? So Google might interpret that as like, oh, I should rank like a blogger who's put together the top, innovative men's dress shoes styles and brands for 2017. That's probably a better result for you than like Zappos dress shoes list page, right? And so I think there's value to understanding the people behind the query and their full intent, and then trying to solve that with the content you create. The second thing I would say is, much as I think Google would love to try and kill it, links are still super powerful. And as a result, you still need them just as much as ever. However, they've gotten much better at identifying spam and manipulation, and also links that they shouldn't really count. And so you need to find ways to earn links organically from sources that indicate to Google that you're a great match for this. So those two things are pretty
If I'm going to be sharing content and trying to build an audience, what social site should I be investing in next year?
Depends on your audience. Totally depends on your audience. Let's say, for example, that
for a tech company that's involved in sharing knowledge and has a lot of mind share. I used to say Twitter, and it feels like Facebook is even more important. No?
It depends what you're trying to do. So Twitter is where you tend to influence influencers, right? Facebook is where you sort of can capture a broad audience, but it's very challenging, right? The organic reach on Facebook is crap. It is terrible. You're lucky if you have 50,000 people who have actually clicked on, like, yes, I'll follow this brand, ZURB on Facebook. You would be incredibly lucky to ever get in front of 5,000 of them with a post you put up. That is a huge stretch. More likely 500.
Okay.
Right? So that.
What's your favorite social?
I personally, I love Twitter. I do think I don't know how much of what ZURB produces is a lot of visual brand and visual design. Instagram might be an awesome option for you.
Okay.
And so too might Snapchat.
Cool. Last question before I open up to a few questions. Newest, hottest, coolest software app to influence marketers or get them excited about trying something new?
Marketers specifically?
Yes. Or SEO.
Yeah, I'm going to go with, there's an app called Nuzzle. Is anyone familiar with that one? Few people. Nuzzle, Nuzzzel. So what it does It's particularly good for influencer marketing, very powerful for Twitter in particular. So it is essentially a feature that Twitter should have, which is, hey, Twitter, can you show me the links that were shared by the most people that I followed in the last day and week? Like that, Twitter should obviously just do that for you, right? If I follow 500 people and 50 of them all shared this one, New Yorker article, well, show me that, like tell me. And Nuzzle does exactly that. So it'll essentially, you connect your Twitter account and then every day or every week or month, whatever you choose, it'll send you a digest of here's all the links that were most shared by everyone on there. And what I've seen is that there's a network effect with it, because if you have a piece of content that is shared by lots of people in a particular network, Nuzzle amplifies that such that everyone in that network starts to see it and they all start to share it, and so it gets even more amplification. So that would be one I'd check out.
We're actually out of time, and I know he might be able to ask a few here. I'd love to give a hand to Mr. Rand for all the information he's given.